Oregon's new law against police using CS gas on protesters is 1 day old, and it's going, great. Why police think they were completely justified in using it anyway. And in this new world where in-person contact can be deadly.
It's been an extraordinary time of transformation and hustle.
We learned how the heck Street Roots is surviving. And a viewer isn't happy that the NBA may paint Black Lives Matter on basketball courts. So we'll look back at the long history of sports getting political. Here's the story.
It is a long history. Hey, thanks for being with us. I'm Dan Haggerty. Welcome to The Story. Thanks for joining us tonight. I know what you're thinking. Here comes another monologue about masks. Not to worry, not today. This is a maskless episode of The Story. I mean, except for right now where I'm talking about masks, to tell you that we're not going to talk about masks, so this doesn't count. But this is instead where I always tell you that we want you to talk to us, to use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter, to email us at thestory@kgw.com. We're going to be reading some comments at the end of the show. Okay, maskless episode starts now. Our big story tonight is the Portland Police Bureau and how our leaders are responding to pressure from protesters who want reform, or in some cases, the defunding of our police. Now, we told you that last week Oregon's legislature passed a handful of police reform bills. On top of banning chokeholds, requiring officers to intervene when they see bad behavior, and limiting police arbitrators, it also banned the use of CS gas unless lives are at stake. And last night, the Bureau got its first big test since the governor signed those bills yesterday.
Good evening. We begin tonight with breaking news here at 11. Police have declared a riot during a protest in North Portland. Police are asking protesters to leave the area. They are using CS gas, a form of tear gas. Okay, so we made it, I don't know, less than a day without using CS gas. So unfortunately, we're going to have to set our days without CS gas ticker back to zero. Now, look, there are no surprise that these protesters targeted the Portland Police Association headquarters last night. And that's because last night, the union's contract with the city of Portland expired. And I want to take a second and break down the unbelievable timing of all of this. Now, before coronavirus took over our lives, the city was all set to vote on a new union contract and a new budget. But once the virus started to spread, lawmakers kind of pivoted and put those issues on the back burner. And before they could even think of revisiting them, we saw another crisis, the killing of George Floyd, and protests against police racism and violence. When suddenly these budget and contract votes that were put aside without much concern took on a whole new sense of urgency, and certainly got a lot more attention from the community. So today, instead of renegotiating an entirely new contract with the Portland Police Association, you could say they punted, you know, after at least a few technical difficulties.
Any further discussion? Carla, please call the roll.
It looks like we may have lost the other two.
What? You're kidding me.
Looks like we don't have Commissioner Haggerty.
Hang on. All right, let's give her a second to get back. I don't know what's going on with the, am I still frozen?
Zoom, man. Gets you every time. It comes for us all. Long story short, though, the city today voted to re-up the old police union contract for another year. So not much has really changed on that front. Now, Commissioner Dan Haggerty continues to be very critical of the police bureau and the union, but she explained why she was okay with this extension.
This extension does not mean everybody stops work for a year and then comes back a year later and starts over again. What it means is we will have the time to do it right and to do it thoughtfully. Otherwise, we would have ended up with the exact contract that we already had, and that was not an option either.
She went on to explain the process a bit more on Twitter and the timing, basically saying if they didn't come to a deal by this upcoming Monday, the process would have gone into mediation, and that wouldn't have been public anymore. So Haggerty felt it was better to extend the current contract instead of taking the negotiations behind closed doors. So really, that's just a long way of saying that's why the action last night was all the way up in North Portland instead of in front of the Justice Center or Revolution Hall, where it has been on most nights. Which brings us back to that police response that we referenced and the tear gas. Now, police quickly lined up in riot gear last night. They declared a riot, and then they fired tear gas at people. And remember, this isn't downtown Portland. I mean, this is a quiet neighborhood. Downtown has seen this sort of thing a lot over the past few weeks, but not here. And as long as police are banned from using tear gas, except when lives are in danger, the question will be how police determine when lives are in danger. Portland Police Chief Chuck Lavelle gave us an idea of why they made the determination last night.
Some have said we're only protecting an empty building and the force used was excessive. My response to that is we would have seen one building lit on fire in a neighborhood where a commercial building fire could have led to residences being burned with families inside.
But for activist groups like Don't Shoot Portland, for them that's just not a good enough reason, and now they are pushing for a judge to sanction the city for its actions last night. More protests are expected tonight, and there will certainly be more in the future. So we're going to see how long we can go, I guess, without the smell of CS gas in the air. Maybe this time we can go more than a day. Maybe not. Now, there might not be a better example of systemic racism in Portland than the story of the Albina neighborhood. I mean, even once Oregon finally started allowing black people to own property, it still redlined them into these small pockets, and Albina is probably the best known example of that. And then came the construction of I-5 right through the middle of it, and added insult to injury for many people living there, which is one of the big reasons why the Rose Quarter expansion has been such a controversial topic for years now, and why this week's setback for the project is such a big deal. The I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project has been in the planning stages now for a decade, and I'm sure most of you know the gist of it. But for the 112 of you who still move to Oregon every single day, this may be brand new, so let me try and catch you up to speed. Basically, it's a plan to add shoulders and auxiliary lanes to I-5 between I-405 and I-84, right by the Moda Center. It's a bottleneck. If you've ever driven through that, especially during rush hour, you know it can be a real mess. But it's probably no coincidence that we're seeing support for that expansion start to slip away after a month of nonstop protests against systemic racism, because too many social justice activists, to many of them, the I-5 expansion is just another example of it, taking something that helped destroy a neighborhood and just making it bigger. Add that to Portland's activist community that already exists and has long protested highway expansion, get a pretty good recipe for a fierce opposition to this project, which could cost more than $750 million. The latest opposition came in the form of the group called the Albina Vision Trust, dropping its support from the project, saying yesterday in a statement, "Throughout the country, countless freeway projects have left an ugly legacy of ripping through primarily African-American communities who suffer the harm and experience none of the benefits. And we made this decision to disengage from ODOT today because we refuse to endorse projects or processes that do not align with our commitment to creating a thriving community that centers both black life and black prosperity." Now, after that statement there, the dominoes really just started to fall. Commissioner Chloe Eudaly, who's in charge of PBOT, pulled her support. So did Mayor Wheeler. And this morning, during a press conference about our new mask policy, Governor Brown weighed in too.
We need to take a look at all of these transportation projects in light of the economic disruption that we're seeing statewide and frankly nationally. That said, we're not going to proceed with this particular project, with the Rose Quarter project, without community support and engagement from the Black and African American community. It's my hope that this particular project can be part of righting historic wrongs, and I'm committed to bringing people back to the table for that discussion.
Now, I also had a chance to talk to Oregon State Senator Lou Frederick about the project. He sits on the Oregon People of Color Caucus. He is also in favor of this project. He thinks it's very important. He wants to see it happen, but not at the expense of the community. However, there was one area of pushback where he didn't agree.
The conversation has kind of more arms and legs to it, not just the idea of bottlenecking and the vitality of a community there, but also people don't want to see, the impression is if you make it easier to drive through that area, it's not going to cut down on congestion. It's just going to invite more people to move here, more cars to drive here, and eventually we're going to be in the same problem down the line in a few years, not to mention in a city that's trying to develop kind of an infrastructure that would have fewer cars downtown. This would invite more people to be driving vehicles.
Well, I disagree with that particular analysis of how it works, because we're not talking about increasing, making it 8 lanes both ways. We're talking about entrance ramps and exit ramps at that spot. That's a different thing than if we were trying to put in a completely new freeway. That's not what the proposal is about. That's not what the plan is about. So there are folks who want to conflate it to making it as though we're somehow putting in a 10-lane freeway right there at the Rose Quarter. That's not the case. It is entrance ramps and exit ramps that makes sense in terms of just being safety and being able to move things around. And if you want to see where that's worked, take a look at 217, take a look at I-205 at 84. We've changed those lanes, we've changed those approaches, and it has not increased the number of people coming through. So that's not really the argument that persuades me.
So, where do we stand right now? So yesterday, ODOT acknowledged that these kinds of historic transportation investments have caused harm to African-American albina community. They said that they're committed to doing business differently moving forward. But as far as this project goes, ODOT says it is not on hold, even with all the support they lost, and planning will continue to move forward.
This Rose Quarter expansion has been a long time coming, but how did we get here? Really, we have to start in 1962, when I-5 carved its way up through Oregon and through the lower Albina neighborhood. That on top of the building of the Memorial Coliseum, Emmanuel Hospital, and the Albina Community Plan in 1993, hundreds of African-American families were effectively kicked out of their homes. Fast forward decades to 2017, when the Oregon legislature passed a $5.3 billion bill to pay for transportation projects. It raised taxes on things like gas and income and car sales to pay for projects that reduced congestion throughout the state. Governor Brown called it one of her biggest priorities, and the I-5 expansion was one of the crown jewels. Over the years, it's been a hot topic every time it comes up in community meetings, with dozens of environmental, transportation, and social justice advocates coming out to speak their mind. Then, in January, several Portland politicians indicated they would oppose the plan unless there was a more extensive environmental review and approval from the community. But on March 27th, they appeared to back off from their environmental demands. That takes us to April 2nd, when the Oregon Transportation Commission said the project can move forward without the environmental review. In recent weeks, Portland residents and millions of people across the country have been protesting for social and racial justice. That's put a renewed focus on how America's highway system leveled parts of traditionally black neighborhoods like Albina. And with the Albina Vision Trust and city leaders pulling their support yesterday, the project's future is in real question. And that's how we got here.
A lot of us are used to making pretty decent daily amount of money, you know, and today, and right now, of course, we can't do that.
What is the future of street roots at a time when human contact can literally kill you? And you know, for a year with no sports, there sure seems to be a surprising amount of sports news today. So we're going to try our hand at a sportscast, our style, when the story continues.
Maybe you noticed my little mousetrap setup at the end of the first block there before we went to commercial. If you have no idea what that's about, get on my Facebook page right now. It is a dramatic saga in the Haggerty household right now. Welcome back to the story. Sometimes I forget, honestly, that a lot of new people are checking out the show every day, and you're probably thinking right now, what the heck is going on? What is this? Everything's fine. I just spent a whole lot more time than most news anchors trying to get you to communicate with us and talk to us here on The Story. So we want to hear what you have to say. Email us at thestory@kgw.com. You can use Twitter and tweet us. Use that hashtag #HeyDan. A lot of times we will read what you got to say right here on the show. Give it a try. It's pretty fun, I promise. We're going to read some comments at the end of the show, but for a second, I do want to talk about something that's pretty serious. Look, almost every industry is struggling because of the coronavirus pandemic. The one we talk about most, of course, is restaurants, but you know it doesn't stop there. Local media outlets, they're suffering too, including one of the most important voices when it comes to our homeless community, Street Roots. Now look, their best marketing tactic is that in-person sales right on the street corner in downtown, and for years, it's been a way for homeless people to work and earn money. And for Street Roots, it's a great way to sell their papers and to circulate their papers and what they have to say. But we're living in this time right now where human touch isn't exactly welcome. I mean, buying a paper directly from one person's hands to another person's hands isn't really the most germ-friendly business model. And obviously, what you're looking here is Street Roots file video that we have, because they've hit pause on those direct sales. Right now, Street Roots is online only, which is safer, but it's less lucrative. It also means that those homeless vendors are losing out on valuable income. Today, Maggie Vespa had a chance to talk to the executive director of Street Roots, along with a vendor, to find out how they're doing.
All right, I am joined now by Kaya Sand, Executive Director of Street Roots. Kaya, we know you're so busy. Everybody is right now, but I really appreciate your time. I just read through again your editorial board's piece from March announcing for the first time ever, Street Roots was going to suspend printing physical copies of the paper. It's months later now. We wanted to catch up and see how you all have been doing and what kind of impact that's had. So how have things been?
Yeah, thank you, Maggie. It's been an extraordinary time of transformation and hustle. So we immediately had to figure out how to make sure we're still getting income to folks, because usually they'd be earning income selling the paper. So we started, because of vendor leadership, extraordinary leadership, we started an action team to do a number of things, to do outreach to other unhoused people. First, just getting accurate information about COVID-19 out, then getting supplies out. Then vendors started running the office because we had to make sure to get people their mail. We had to make sure that people had access to certain really, life-sustaining things. And then vendors started signing people up for the $1,200 stimulus checks. We got over 200 people signed up for that. So that's like $240,000 into the pockets of unhoused people.
How is the paper doing financially?
I would say that we really need the largesse of the community. So please do support Street Roots, both to be able to run our paper and to get money directly to unhoused people. We are preparing to go back on the streets. We're doing this as so many other organizations in a really thoughtful, intentional way. Our vendors are having a lot of input on what it is that'll help them feel safe and healthy. We're going to relaunch actually with a color magazine as our first issue, as a chronicle of these times since we shut down, really thinking about unhoused people in COVID-19 and in this kind of really transformative historic moment.
When might that relaunch happen?
We're looking at late July, early August. We've been really following the governor's phases carefully, watching for phase 2. We're really in constant communication with the health department.
I'm going to bring in Mike D now. Mike, you are the outreach director and coordinator. You're also a vendor. Just your take on what this suspension of printing the physical copies has meant for the vendors who, we've seen around Portland for so long.
It's been pretty hectic. Because a lot of us are used to making a pretty decent daily amount of money, and today, and right now, of course, we can't do that. I know for me, I was selling up at PSU. I was raking in anywhere between $60 and $100 a day. And
where are you now?
I make $200 a week.
What's it been like just to have downtown be such a ghost town for a while?
Well, since the riots have been going, it hasn't been such a ghost town, but it's different. It's kind of an eerie feeling, walking through during the daytime and there's maybe 10 people in a whole 3-block radius. You're like, this isn't Portland.
I wanted to just say one more thing, I think, too, just in terms of the uprisings in this moment and how it really does connect to the work that we're doing every day, because, I find that exciting that we might be able to make more transformative change in terms of our racist structures in our society. Both African Americans and Native Portlanders are way overrepresented in terms of people who are unhoused. So this, to us, like the fact people are out on the streets making sure that we don't let up is incredibly hopeful.
Great. All right, guys, Mike, Kaya, thank you so much. We really, it's great to hear that Street Roots has plans to launch the physical copies again, and we just appreciate the update on Street Roots in general. So thank you both.
Thank you, Maggie. Really appreciate it.
No, those were just some of the highlights of the conversation. If you want to see the whole uncut video, we're going to have that uploaded for you on the KGW YouTube channel. Speaking of things to watch, I'm missing sports. Are you missing sports? I'm missing a lot. I mean, some of them are starting to come back without fans, which is a little bit weird, but I'll take it. I mean, the Portland Thorns played last weekend for the first time, and the NBA is going to be restarting their season at the end of the month, which I honestly did not see coming. In the spirit of all that, why don't we catch up on some of the recent sports headlines? Our very own Damian Lillard got a huge honor this week. He's going to be on the cover of the new NBA 2K21 video game, which he says is, quote, a dream come true. So I'm happy for him. And today we learned Blazers play-by-play announcer Kevin Calabro is stepping down. He wants to focus more on his family. So you're not going to hear his voice when the season starts back up, and I'm glad he's doing what he wants to do. And when the NBA kicks off at Walt Disney World, we might see something new on the court. Multiple reports say the league will paint Black Lives Matter on the sidelines, and the WNBA might do the same. I also want to mention Sports Sunday returns this weekend, so Orlando Sanchez is going to have a whole lot more on all of this. But in the meantime, I do want to take a moment to talk about a sports-related email that we got. Now, it's not exactly clear if this is in response to that last story or something entirely different, but I still want to read it to you here. This is from Robbie. He says, Dan, the Blazers and the NBA have decided to wade into politics. Just when we have something non-political to look forward to, they go and screw that up. I have no interest in watching the Blazers or any sports that want to get political. People watch sports for an escape. The only thing I can do is vote with my dollar. So no more games, no more cable sports, no more nonsense. Just shut up and play. Well, Robbie, you can absolutely choose not to watch the Blazers, but I will say you're going to have a pretty hard time finding any sports without some kind of political connection. Here's the thing. That isn't a new combination. Mixing sports and politics goes way back, like way back to ancient times. I mean, a little more recent than ancient is an example from 1832. South Carolina was trying to refuse or nullify a federal import tax from President Andrew Jackson. It was a huge political battle. So at a horse race, two horses named Andrew Jackson and Nullifier faced off. Then there are the Olympics, of course, always political. I mean, this just happens when you have all these countries coming together that might not agree on policy or are even at war with each other. One famous example I'm sure you know, this man, Jesse Owens, winning 4 gold medals at the 1936 Berlin Olympics right in front of Adolf Hitler. And then there was the Black Power salute on the medal stand from Tommy Smith and John Carlos at the 1968 Olympics. Do you want a more recent local example? We have that too. Last year, Major League Soccer banned fans from holding political signs, including the anti-fascist Iron Front flag that's regularly seen at Timbers games. But after this huge outcry and protest from the Timbers Army, the MLS reversed its ban on the symbol. People perceive that as a left-leaning effort, so why don't we take a look at an example of one that's perceived as right-leaning. Last month, NASCAR banned Confederate flags from its races, so people protested with flags outside of the Geico 500 in Alabama, and someone flew a Confederate flag saying defund NASCAR over the track. So look, the point is, sports are always going to be political, whether you like it or not. Hopefully you've been watching us with your phone in your hand. That's what we like you to do, so you can send us in some comments and questions and critiques. We're going to read some of those after the break. So use that hashtag HeyDan or send us an email at thestory@kgw.com. We're going to finish things up next. Lots of comments. Send us an email. Look us up on Twitter. Use that hashtag HeyDan. You can also search that hashtag to see what other people are talking to us about. Got this email from KT. Said, you seem to be emphasizing the displacement of blacks in the Albina neighborhood to construct I-5. But does it matter what race was displaced? Wouldn't anyone living in the path of the freeway construction be displaced? Yes, but as we described, that neighborhood was specifically majority African American by a large percentage because of other racist policies like redlining. We're not talking about, yes, anybody living in that area would be displaced, but it's overwhelmingly African Americans who have suffered because of that redlining and because of the I-5 being put there. So I get what you're saying, but let's not dilute the point. We got another one from Dan Gallagher, said, I miss the mask monologues. Do you? Well, I'm sure, keep watching. I'm sure there's another one in the future. And then this one from Lori Bell. You get a lot of flack for things you talk about on this show, but I just want you to know that I look forward to watching TBS every night. We're on KGW, not TBS. It's okay. That's all right. That's the story for tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow. The news was at 6.